I'm gonna open Facebook.
Yes, we're live. Hello, everyone.
Hey! Hi, everyone. Welcome to a special edition. I'm with Eileen Mello, astrologer and friend, and she's here today to talk to us about the upcoming full moon and lunar eclipse in Taurus. And I wanted to bring her on because I know that a lot of you have, and I teach this in my Oracle course, a lot of people will do, they'll do like full moon rituals and pull Oracle cards. And I share a few spreads in my course that you can do to kind of tap into the energy of the full moon and releasing and charging crystals and all of that. But I wanted to bring our expert on today so she can tell us more about the full moon, and this one's unique because there is a lunar eclipse, and so I want to hear more about the energies around this and just start with the basics because I'm still learning a lot and I know a lot of you are still learning. So let's dive in. So first I'll just introduce you, Eileen, for anybody who's new to watching, if you want to share a little bit about yourself.
Yes. Hi, thanks, everyone. Hello, friends. For those of you who haven't seen me communicate or conversate rather with Robin yet, my name is Eileen Mello, and I am a second generation evolutionary astrologer. So when I am interpreting a person's horoscope or chart, I am looking specifically at your soul's evolutionary journey. Okay, so astrology, a lot of people don't even have a working definition of astrology, but astrology is essentially the study of the planetary cycles and how they coincide with events on Earth, and more particularly in our individual lives. So I was telling a client last night, I don't actually believe that astrology that the planets rather affect us in our individual lives. I believe that they're mirroring back what's happening. And so if you learn the language of astrology, then you can better navigate and understand your life and understand the planetary cycles and how to get down with the cosmos so that things are just easier. And even if not easier, so that you have really an understanding, like this is the cycle I'm in and this is how long it might take for this transition, etc. So I find astrology particularly beneficial for that reason. Now, what we're looking at today is this big full moon lunar eclipse, which actually happens on Friday, November 19th, this Friday. And I'm going to find the exact time again. On the Pacific coast, on the West Coast, it happens at 12:57 a.m. Okay, so those of you on the East Coast, it'll be 3 hours ahead, obviously. And the full moon energies, the eclipse energies, we tend to feel them in the lead up to the event itself. And so my guess is that most of us will actually be feeling this very intensely on Thursday, before it actually like hits, the moon becomes completely full very early Friday morning. Does that make sense, Robin?
Yeah. And then when the eclipse happens, it's almost like there's going to be a bright light outlining the moon, right?
Yeah, so this is, it depends on where in the world you are, like how much you get to see of the eclipse, but that's a good segue into what is the difference between a full moon and a full moon lunar eclipse. And so we have eclipses several times a year, and it is always when the lunar nodes of the moon are in alignment with the sun, the earth, and the moon, be it a full moon or a new moon. There's two types of eclipses. It's a full moon eclipse and a new moon eclipse. And for the moon, sorry. So the lunar nodes are mathematical points that I'm not going to go into because it's too astronomical and scientific. It's not really relevant. The big takeaway is that the lunar nodes dictate whether or not we are having an eclipse when the moon is full or new. Okay, so we obviously have a full moon every month. We have a new moon every month, but we don't have an eclipse every month during that time, right? So it's the lunar nodes that dictate the eclipse. And I do have an article that I wrote for an astrology magazine called The Mountain Astrologer, and anybody can download it. It's a 3-minute it's a 3-minute read. It's super simple, and it explains the astrological and astronomical significance. So we will link to that. I tried to just link to it and I couldn't, but I will do it
Yeah.
later. Yeah. Did that make sense? I feel like I'm not sure I was clear.
Yeah, because I think sometimes we know, like we hear about it, and I remember like from a young child, we would go out and like look at the sky, but not really know like what's, I mean, I think most people know that just from science and learning that it's like when the sun and the moon kind of come
Yeah.
together in transit, but
Yeah. So the full moon lunar eclipse is when the Earth passes between the sun and the moon.
so it's kind of that like barrier between the
Yes.
two.
And
Yeah.
this is what I describe in that little 3-minute read of an article is the different types of eclipses and what's happening astronomically, and then the astrological significance of them as well. Because this is, yes, it's basic science, but I forget all the time. And I'm an astrologer who's written an article about it. And I still have to go back and be like, wait, is it the moon that's passing or is it the Earth that's passing? Because for a solar eclipse, it's when the moon passes. So
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's valid that we forget these things. But so I want to also state that the full moon is always in the opposite sign of the sun. So the sun currently is in the sign of Scorpio, and therefore the full moon is in Taurus. So it is a full moon lunar eclipse in the sign of Taurus. And so it is highlighting the Taurus Scorpio axis. And we can talk more about the astrological energies as well whenever you're ready to.
Yeah, I'm curious just for my own and those watching, but my moon is in Scorpio and my ascending is in Taurus. And,
Mhm.
my sun is in
Yeah,
Sagittarius. So I'm like, ooh, it's like all these energies that are in my chart.
yeah. And
So,
so, yeah, I think what you're getting at is, am I going to feel this more, or is this going
right.
to affect me? And the answer is yes. And again, as I started out by saying, I don't believe that the energy is affecting us. It's reflecting back that we are having, that we're going through something, not
Yeah.
necessarily creating it. It's not the cause of it. So for anyone who has a lot of people know the sign of their sun and their moon. So anyone who has sun or moon in Taurus or Scorpio, yeah, you're going to feel it more. You're going to be more sensitive to it. On the one hand, you're already somewhat familiar with these energies, but on the other hand, it's going to heighten them. And so what happens with the astrology is people will think, well, you know, I'm not a Scorpio or I'm not a Gemini, whatever it may be. But the reality is, we all have all of these energies in our chart because astrology is simply, especially the type of astrology I practice, evolutionary astrology, it's really looking at archetypes of the human psyche. And all humans carry these same archetypes in the subconscious. And so that's what astrology is reflecting, is the archetypes that we're all experiencing. Obviously, we each experience the archetypes differently, right? I usually give the example of being a mom. So some of us can, we only know what motherhood is like from being a child, whereas others will go on to have many children and have a completely different experience of the maternal archetype, right? But we all know, we all have experience with that in some aspect. So when we're looking at a lunar eclipse that's in the sign of Taurus and is reflecting back, it's really the sun is illuminating this big full moon, right? That is happening for everyone in your astrological chart, your horoscope somewhere. So it's illuminating that sector of your life. So yes, some of us will be feeling it more intensely than others, but we're all going to get a big dose of this energy. And I'm going to stop there to see if you have any questions, Robin, before I keep going.
Yeah, I love the way you phrased it with astrology not creating. It's like it's not creating the what's happening in your life. It's more reflecting, and that's
Mm-hmm.
very similar to what I teach with the oracle. Is it's like the oracle is a mirror reflecting back to us what we already know inside, and so astrology is doing the same. So it's not like it may intensify things, but it's also like I feel like our energies, like you said, like some of us might be impacted a little more, feel it. You could be like extra tired this time or wired or have certain things have a light shown on them to reflect on. but it's not necessarily like creating it, which I think
Right.
is very important to acknowledge, because we're definitely in, we've all been there. Like I've been there, you've been there. We've all been in the space where we're looking for something outside of ourselves to blame.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it can be common to say like, oh, this full moon energy is just,
Right.
it's just making me so tired, and I
Yes.
just had a fight with somebody because of it and everything, when
Yeah.
really it's like, no, it's heightening certain things within your
Yes.
chart.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And to be fair, even I make comments like that all the time because we don't have really the languaging to talk about this. It's like we don't even have the diction to be really accurate about what we mean when we're saying that we're being influenced by, because we are all in a sea of energy. And some of us are more sensitive to energies than other people are. And some of us can be very sensitive to that energy without even recognizing it, but we're all interacting with the energies of the planet, the cosmos, whatever reality, whatever it is, this thing that we're in, right? Some people would call it the matrix or whatever dimension. So I couldn't explain that from any kind of scientific modality, but I know it to be true from experience, right? And
Yeah.
probably those watching now also.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm curious with like the energy. So we're in Scorpio right now, and with the full moon and the
Yeah.
lunar eclipse is going to be Taurus energy. So how, what, I don't know, what can we expect?
Yes, perfect. I Let's talk about like the archetypal energies of these two signs, because that's what's being highlighted in our lives right now. And Scorpio, the sun being in Scorpio, is extremely important. It is Scorpio season, and Scorpio fundamentally is the sign of transformation and self-empowerment. Okay, now these are like big kind of transcendent words, and so if we can drop that down into like our daily lives, what does that mean? It means that we often, during Scorpio season, several things can happen. It can feel very emotionally intense because it's a water sign. And Scorpio is exceptional at self reflection. And so we can be doing a lot of really intense self reflection and identifying of what in astrologies we call the scorpionic inner limitations. So it's noticing where there is something within one's inner landscape that may be causing a scenario or a dynamic that is not conducive for your life, something that you're not really enjoying, right? And of course, these are all defense mechanisms that have been put in place by the ego, usually at a very young age, that have been outgrown and no longer serve us. And so Scorpio is really the archetype of identifying what's no longer in service to the soul's evolutionary growth. And this is why the self-empowerment comes up, right? Because it's like, how do you empower yourself rather than be a victim? As you mentioned, you didn't use that word, but that's what you were talking about, of focusing, looking outward instead of inward, and pointing the finger outward instead of looking inward. Scorpio is exceptional at looking inward and taking real responsibility for itself in terms of, oh, wow, this thing I keep projecting is actually my own. And now what do I need to do about it? So it can go into the very dark recesses of the heart and the soul and the mind and really mine out what is there that needs to be transformed. So it has a transformative effect. And so that's where the sun is right now. It's Scorpio season. And this full moon eclipse, it is happening in the sign of Taurus, which I'll dive into. But I just want to state for those of you who are more tuned into the astronomy and astrology, currently the lunar nodes are in the sign of Gemini and Sagittarius, but the way the alignment is currently, the full moon is very, very close to the node Gemini, which is the next sign of the zodiac. It's Taurus and then Gemini. And so it's giving us a hint of what is to come, because the lunar nodes shift signs every 18 months thereabouts. So we had this influx of Gemini Sag energy the last almost 18 months. And then in January 18th actually, is when the nodes change signs. And so this Scorpio energy that we're feeling and the Taurus full moon energy that we'll be feeling is going to be kind of an underlying energy that we feel over the next, beginning in mid-January for the next 18 months. So
Wow.
it's important to like really spend some time reflecting on what these energies mean personally, and then for the collective, and then of course where they're falling in your own chart, because we talked about this, right, Robin? You have the Scorpio moon and the Taurus ascendant, and so that's lighting up an important polarity point in your chart, and that will be the case for everyone because the nodes are traveling through everyone's charts all the time, and that helps you understand what sector of your life is being highlighted. Before I talk about Taurus, do you have any questions?
Oh, that's yeah, it's very interesting. So I wasn't aware of that with the lunar
Nodes.
nodes. So that's really fascinating, and it's gonna cause me to kind of go back and reflect over the last 18 months.
Yeah.
To see like, and for me, it's been very like I've been like shedding a lot of old beliefs and patterns and highlighting, and also it's been intense the last 18 months. So yeah, I'm curious to see.
For all of us, and just super quickly, that Sag, and we could even do another video on this, but the Sag Gemini polarity is about belief systems, our thought processes and perceptions. And Gemini also is the archetype of the media, because it's communication and it's the dissemination of communication. And then Sagittarius is dogma and belief systems. And we've seen that, right, with first the president and then COVID, how we disseminate information, fake news, all of these things has been really, really, really spotlighted in a way that we haven't ever seen before in the last 18 months. And that will shift from this kind of, I would say, external reflection to an internal reflection. And this is a good segue to talk about the Taurus archetype if you don't have any questions about Scorpio. Yeah, so the Taurus archetype, fundamentally, first of all, Taurus is a sign that's ruled by the planet Venus, and Venus is about love and money. And Taurus specifically is about self-love and money. So there can be a focus on money, because really what Taurus is about is our values and our value systems. And I'll link to some videos I've done on values, because this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. But it is the Taurus archetype and where Taurus falls in our chart that really helps us hone in on what are our value systems and why, and where can we find a greater sense of self-worth. So our value systems are always defining our actions in life, right? It's like what you value the most, you will put your time and attention and money toward. And sometimes we find that actually that thing that I said was super important, I'm not finding the time or energy for it. And then you get to reflect on, hey, I think the last example I gave was, if I say that purchasing a new home is super important to me, but I'm not saving for the deposit on this huge purchase, and I'm going out and spending my money on trivial things, then how important is that actually? Because I'm not in alignment with my values and my goals. So this full moon can really help us, this eclipse can help us see where are we out of alignment with our values, and what is also the inner limitation that may be holding us back from coming into alignment with that value. And on just a more mundane level, it may really kick off quite a bit of thinking about money. Especially there's other planetary energy that I won't get into because we're talking about so much already, but there's a lot of this kind of thinking about money and how we spend our money and how we invest our money. And we could even see that reflected politically or on the global scale with shifts in currency and things like this. So, but fundamentally what we're looking at, I like to break all of these things down so it's very simplistic, because we can be extremely nuanced. But at its core, the Scorpio Taurus polarity, because they're opposite signs in the zodiac, is about how do we find self-worth, self-value, self-empowerment through aligning with our value system and eliminating anything that is not in alignment with our value system.
Yeah.
So that's what I would encourage folks to reflect on under the eclipse. And it really is different being under eclipse energies than just a typical full moon. And so that energy is not only heightened, but the realizations that we have can be just more potent and poignant as well. So one thing we haven't talked about astronomically is that the eclipses always come in pairs, sometimes in threes, because it's based on the lunar nodes. And so we will always have a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse 2 weeks apart. So we're getting the lunar eclipse on the 19th, and then we have a solar eclipse coming up 2 weeks later. And this is where these energies, they're playing off of each other in a way. So what we're experiencing now, it's like the buildup to this culmination 2 weeks from now. And I just want to look, that's December 3rd. And it's aligning, it will be a new moon solar eclipse. Remember I was saying it's the new moon or the full moon. And so the new moon will be in the sign of Sagittarius because the sun is in Sagittarius.
Yeah, and I remember last year we had 3.
Yes, that is correct. Three sets. Yeah, it was really intense last year.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, and I love. We'll type the inquiries into the chat so that you guys can see that, because I would encourage everyone to take some time, since we are in that Scorpio energy of self-reflection and tuning in. To really take time to reflect around that. And that's where I would say that you can take some time to sit with it. And I would encourage you to sit with the questions and sit in stillness and just contemplate for yourself before you do anything else and look to any outside sources. Just notice what comes up for you. And then you can use, if you're wanting more inquiry, you can use oracle cards or tarot cards to kind of highlight some of that reflection for you to jumpstart it. So that's where your tools can come in handy. And I like that you offered some great contemplative questions that people can sit with and use to reflect.
Yeah. One thing I would really like to highlight is Scorpio and Taurus are both they're introspective signs, and Taurus is very self-sufficient, independent, has a lot of friends, it loves its friends, but it is prone to doing things on its own and not needing others, and not even realizing at times hey, this would be a lot easier if I called my BFF and had her come over to help me. It's just it just does it on its own. It's self-sufficient. And Scorpio doesn't like to have interactions or relationships with around anything that's superficial. It wants depth and intimacy. And so you have this self-sufficient sign, and then this sign that would rather be alone than be in a superficial environment. And so both signs are prone to being a bit withdrawn and being solitary. That's a good word for it, solitary. And so we're looking at how this is energy that's asking you to go within, to go inward. And I'm mentioning this specifically because there's so much, as you mentioned earlier, of this blaming. And we're living in a very divisive time where we're constantly, if I can just deviate for a minute to make my point, I was at the bank before coming over here, and I watched the gentleman in front of me, my age, my demographic, but a man, and he was not wearing a mask, even though there's signs everywhere in the bank that say wear a mask. And I've watched him pass now 3 kiosks where there are masks, right? And I'm like, does he think when he walks up to the teller that he's not going to be asked to put a mask on? What is this inside of his mind right now that's causing him to think that somehow he's exempt from this rule? And if he doesn't like it, he can go to a different bank. Because if nobody noticed, this bank is not a requirement for any of us. Banks, yes, are a requirement. we could have a whole nother philosophical conversation there. But this particular bank, right? And so of course he goes up to the teller and she asks him and he refuses. And so she says, well, you got to do it. And so then he does this. And she's like, or you could just put on a mask, and he refuses. And so she says, okay, no problem. We now need to go outside for me to help you and to answer your question. And they proceeded to go outside. Okay. Now I'm telling this story because what I watched was just a fundamental disrespect of the bank's request, right? And we could have a political conversation, we could have an ideological conversation about this. But when it comes to the Scorpio Taurus energy, it is asking you, I would ask this gentleman if I ever had a conversation with him, what is going on inside of you that's arguing with the reality that is life? So you can have a disagreement with life, and you can, like there are lots of things about this reality that I don't agree with, and I'm politically active, or I do whatever I do to make some kind of a change. But like, that's because I'm telling a story about it. So what is the story that you're telling that keeps you pointing the finger outside? And as we're looking at or complaining about this divisive country that we now live in, right? It's so divisive everywhere we go.
Right.
Where are you divided on the inside? Because we would not be a divided collective if we weren't divided on the inside, if this rage and war wasn't happening on the inside. And so getting really clear about our values, like I personally have very strong opinions about masking, but I fundamentally value the harmony of my community more than I value any of my political opinions about masking. And therefore I just put on the mask because I know that a lot of people feel much safer with it. Whether or not I think that that's crazy town or not, I am fundamentally respectful of the people in my community, right?
Yeah.
So again, this is a huge political conversation. I'm not trying to make it political, but I think it's an excellent example of what's your value system, where are you divided on the inside, what's going on in here that's creating the actions out there, right? And this is not to say good or bad. I'm not trying to say the dude at the bank was bad. I'm just saying there was a strong story running, right? And we can see it in these moments, and we all have these moments. So you might not be the guy at the bank today, but you're the guy at the bank when you're talking to your husband or when you're talking to your kid, right? There's some ways in which we're all doing this in our lives. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, because it's like there's something out there where we're the exemption to the quote rule that's out there. And so it's taking that time to reflect and look within about like, oh, well, what is it within me that I'm have been not willing to see? Or
right.
why am I putting up such a fight about something so minimal like this?
Yeah, and we have we have Venus in Capricorn right now, and she will be retrograde in the sign of Capricorn. She's sticking around the sign of Capricorn for months, and Capricorn is fundamentally the sign of self-responsibility and integrity. And so we are really getting, Venus is about values and money. So we're really getting a whopping dose with the eclipses and Venus retrograde. And then when the lunar nodes change signs to Taurus and Scorpio next year, we are going to be getting a lot of experiences in our lives that help us. And they're not all going to be pleasant experiences, but they will align us with our value systems around money, and Venus is love. It's interpersonal relationships. So it's your relationship to others, to the external world. And then in Taurus, it's our relationship to ourself. So we're really going to get to examine that. And do we want to have such divisiveness? What creates more divisiveness internally and externally? That's really going to be on display. And we'll get to see it in a lot of different ways, personally, and then through the collective as well. Oof.
Yeah, exciting. A lot of things happening. So to kind of just wrap up this discussion here, what are some takeaways that people can do to, I know we'll type in the chat, so the contemplative questions, but what are some takeaways or preparations people can do to kind of just like be aware of the energies that we're stepping into? And
Yeah, it's a great question. So first and foremost, because the energy is more intense, I always recommend that people really take it easy the day before and the day of. This one especially because it's what, like 1 a.m. West Coast time, so it's really, you're going to feel it strongly. The like it's like an accumulation of energy, right? And then a pressure, and then the pressure released at the time of the actual event, the eclipse. So Thursday and Friday are going to be intense, Thursday more than Friday. And I really encourage people to take it easy on themselves. Like, don't do drugs and alcohol because your body is more sensitive. Like, try to eat cleaner foods because you really are more sensitive at this time. And if you can, as an astrologer, I've experimented with how I interface with the world on intense energy days, and I found that you can't avoid anything. Like, you could be like, I'm going to do a silent meditation today and turn off my phone because I'm afraid that X, Y, and Z is going to happen. Well, then I think I used the example of a natural disaster once. Like, yeah, you might be out of town for the actual hurricane, but then you still got to come home to your house having been devastated by the hurricane. So it's not about necessarily avoiding life on these days or like hiding away, but it is about just being aware that things might get real and they might get very intense, and you may feel more intense. You may wake up crying or having just like an extreme, what you term an extreme response, but in reality it's just it's just energy that you're feeling. And if you can let it move through you, especially by abstaining from any activities or substances that will make it harder to do that, then you're going to already have a leg up. Just the awareness that this is happening is giving everyone a leg up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And yeah, I would even throw coffee in there, and so many people will be like,
Don't
no,
throw coffee in there, Robin.
but for me, I'm throwing it in
Sure.
for myself because I'm super sensitive to caffeine.
Mm-hmm.
So
And it is a stimulant, so you are not wrong. Sugar, yeah, all of it.
sugar, caffeine,
Mm-hmm.
all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's for 2 days, people. You can do it.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's a good time to really like pray and do your meditation. You know,
yeah.
not just the ritual, but the actual, like, if there is something that is going on in your life, and I'm sorry, is there anybody who doesn't have something going on right now? It's a shit time, right? Like, let's just keep it real. So whatever is up for you personally, now is a really time to do some deep reflective work about it and bust out your journal and write about it and do the contemplative exercises, because the Scorpio energy will elicit much more of a response from you. It'll be easier to dive into that and to mine it than it is at other times. And so it's like, really take advantage of the cosmic energies because they're here to help you.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I think that that's great. And we'll drop those in the chat, and then you can use your tools, but really take this time to self-reflect and tune in. And if you have any questions or curiosities around this conversation, please drop them in the comments. And that way Eileen can see them and we can get back to you. And on her website too, you can, if you're wondering about all these dates that she's talking about, you can get her electrifying astrology download for free
Yeah, it's this
on her
thing.
website. And it has all of these important dates
And
on
it
there.
links to your digital calendar so you don't have to have a printout like I do.
Yeah. So it automatically alerts me when something is happening. So thank you. Thank you for coming on. This
Yeah,
is
thank you for having me, Robin.
I learned a lot, and I hope you all did as well. And we will catch you next time.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Bye, friends.